Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission today is laser-focused. We're not just looking at a murder case. We are exploring just a meticulous timeline of deception that stretched across years.
Yeah, and it was all finally exposed by a single, desperate, failed attempt at a second crime.
Exactly. We are going deep into the sources, detailing the life and convictions of Patricia Byers, the woman who earned that chilling title, the Black Widow.
The material we have just paints this picture of intense calculation, all driven by greed. What's truly compelling, for investigators, is how the police, while meticulously building a case against her for one crime—
The attempted murder in 1993.
Right. While they're doing that, they accidentally pull on a thread that leads them straight back to a completely separate 3-year-old cold case. A case involving a man who had, for all intents and purposes, simply vanished.
That dual timeline is what makes this so riveting. We're going to unpack all of it. The specific forensic evidence and some of these details, like wood shavings, are just incredible. We'll get into the years of stunning financial forgery and the enduring legal battle over a body that, to this day, remains missing. This dive shows exactly how far ambition and really a relentless hunger for money can push a person. Okay, so let's start in April 1993. The setting is the beautiful Queensland coast in the peaceful waters of Moreton Bay.
It's a popular spot. Lots of boats.
And on one of those boats is Patricia Byers, 46 years old, an insurance agent. And she's seemingly enjoying this stable, comfortable life with her partner, John Asquith. He's 53, also an insurance agent.
And by all appearances, they were, a picture of suburban contentment. They'd been in a committed de facto relationship for a while. They shared a home.
They even had a side hustle, right?
Yeah, they ran a modest fast food stall together, which gave them a nice second income. And when police later interviewed friends, everyone emphasized the same thing. There were no signs of trouble.
No major arguments, no financial stress.
None. They seemed so solid, in fact, that close friends believed an official marriage was just around the corner.
And it was that very sense of normalcy that really provided the perfect cover for what was about to happen.
Absolutely.
They decide to take their private yacht, the Misty Blue, out for a romantic weekend getaway. Everything about the evening was described as just utterly idyllic.
Dinner on deck, 2 bottles of red wine shared between them. The sources even mentioned them showering together on the deck under the stars before going to bed.
It's the absolute pinnacle of domestic bliss, which, of course, makes the abrupt transition to horror so jarring.
Precisely. Because that bliss was shattered around 3 a.m., Asquith woke up to an immediate blinding pain in his head.
He'd been shot.
The trauma must have been just unimaginable.
And yet, despite having a bullet fragment literally lodged in his skull, he remained conscious.
Which is incredible. He managed to scramble up onto the deck, where he finds Byers slumped over, claiming she'd been struck and attacked.
He was lucid enough to recognize how serious his injury was.
He was, and he managed to get on the radio and contact the Coast Guard for rescue.
And this is where the story and the investigation immediately begins to smell rotten.
Completely. When rescuers arrive, they find a gravely injured John Asquith, but Patricia Byers is, entirely unharmed.
And she immediately starts spinning this bizarre, convoluted story.
She does. To the rescuers, to the first police on the scene, Senior Sergeant Barry Bullion, she launches right into the notorious pirate theory.
Pirates in Moreton Bay.
Pirates. She claimed they were attacked, she was knocked unconscious, and that she had total memory loss about the incident, suggesting these shadowy figures had boarded the boat.
Which, as an insurance agent herself, she had to know was just a ridiculous proposition.
Of course. Moreton Bay is essentially Brisbane's front yard. It's a busy waterway. Police records showed not one instance of piracy for decades.
And the crime scene completely contradicted her story.
That's the key, the complete lack of theft. When police surveyed the Misty Blue, nothing was missing. Not the valuable fishing gear, not the communication equipment.
His wallet. Cash.
All there. Wallet, cash, credit cards. Look, if armed intruders board your boat in the middle of the night, they're going to take something. They have a purpose.
Right. They don't just commit extreme violence and leave empty-handed.
Makes no logical sense. The police rapidly concluded the attacker had to be one of the 2 people who were on that boat.
And once Asquith was rushed to the hospital, the whole thing shifted instantly from a strange maritime incident to attempted murder.
It did, because at first responders couldn't be sure what the injury was, but the X-rays, they confirmed the dark truth.
What did they show?
The x-rays were decisive. This was absolutely not a blow to the head or a fall. There were bullet fragments embedded 7 centimeters deep into his skull.
7 centimeters.
Yes, that degree of penetration confirms a firearm was used at close range. And the investigation moved squarely toward deliberate, targeted violence.
And Byers' actions in the aftermath, I mean, they only compounded the suspicion that she was the one who did it.
Oh, completely. Asquith, who's still trying to make sense of what happened, he told police he remembered seeing the gun below deck right after he was shot.
But it vanished.
It vanished before the Coast Guard arrived. And that's vital because Byers was frantically trying to get him to retract that statement.
While he's in the hospital.
Yes. While he's recovering from being shot by the woman he loved, she is actively campaigning for him to lie to the investigators and say he never saw a firearm.
That's a stunning lack of remorse. It's pure focus on just getting rid of the evidence.
The emotional betrayal is horrific. He's clinging to this idea that maybe it was an accident or that they were victims while she's trying to manipulate him from his hospital bed.
And then came the second major red flag, when detectives went to interview her.
Right. They go to the hospital expecting to find a traumatized partner. Instead, they find an empty room.
She just left.
She was gone. Detectives like Dave Houston discovered Byers had just up and left the hospital without telling anyone. Not the police, not the medical staff.
That is not the behavior of a loving partner who's just been through a traumatic event.
Not at all. It immediately gave credibility to the theory that she was the solo attacker, and now she had this massive gap in her timeline that needed accounting for. So once the police establish Byers as the prime suspect, they move immediately to motive. And in cases of sudden violence within a relationship...
Especially when money is involved.
Exactly. The first place you look is assets and insurance.
And Asquith, he initially believed his only life insurance policy benefited his children from his previous marriage.
He did, which must have made the actual discovery just jaw-dropping for the police.
What did they find?
It was more than jaw-dropping. It was the foundation of the whole case. Investigators discovered not one, but 5 life insurance policies taken out against John Asquith's life. 5. The combined value was $275,000, and Patricia Byers was listed as the sole irrevocable beneficiary on all of them.
So this wasn't a sudden cash grab. This was planned.
Oh, this was a well-planned financial execution.
But getting 5 policies on someone without their cooperation seems difficult. How did she pull that off?
Through astonishing levels of high-quality forgery. This is where forensic expert Greg Marhane was critical. He analyzed Asquith's signature on all the policies and compared it to genuine samples from him.
Yeah.
Marhane confirmed they were painstaking counterfeits. They weren't flowing or natural. He said they were clearly drawn. He noted what he called hesitation marks and these unnatural stopping points that happen when someone is meticulously trying to copy a signature, not just writing their own name.
So it showed hours of careful, deliberate practice.
Absolutely. The forgery confirms the motive and the planning. But to get the policies approved, she also needed to submit genuine-looking medical documents.
The blood test certificate, right?
Yes, and this is where her knowledge of the insurance industry made the fraud even more brazen. The insurer required a blood test result from a local clinic. When detectives went to verify the records at that clinic, they found nothing for John Asquith.
But they found a record for someone else.
They found a record for a Joan Asquith.
Joan. A female version of the name.
Exactly. Byers, the professional insurance agent, had gone to the clinic herself, had a blood test done under this subtly altered female name, and then took the legitimate certificate. She then tampered with it, changing the name from Joan to John before sending it off.
And the clinic staff could identify her.
They did. They picked her out of a photo lineup as the woman who showed up for the test as Joan. The level of confidence and cold manipulation, I mean, to successfully pass yourself off as a fictional woman to secure your future payout is just astonishing.
It really speaks volumes about her operational strategy. She had the documents, the motive, the means. Okay, so let's go back to that critical time gap when she vanished from the hospital.
While he was in surgery.
Yes. What did investigators trace her doing during those critical hours?
This is the high-stakes moment where the criminal gets sloppy. Police surveillance and ATM records prove she drove straight from the hospital to Binley, a town south of Brisbane.
What did she do there?
First stop, an ATM where she withdraws a large amount of cash. Second stop, a gun shop directly across the street. She purchased a brand new .22 caliber rifle.
And paid in cash.
Paid entirely in the fresh cash she had just withdrawn.
A replacement gun. The murder weapon was a .22, and she bought a nearly identical one. What was the purpose of this?
The theory is solid. She owned the original .22 she'd used, and she disposed of it, probably by dumping it in the water. So she flees the hospital to buy a replacement.
Hoping to swap it into their home arsenal before investigators could secure their firearm.
Exactly. She wanted a clean gun available so she could claim it was the one she owned all along.
But Asquith, even while recovering, he picked up on a discrepancy, didn't he?
He did. He told police he was certain the new gun she brought back to the house had a high-powered scope, which their original family gun did not have. Her cover-up was so desperate she bought an imperfect replacement, and the victim noticed.
The case against her is building and building.
Yeah.
But the real breakthrough didn't come from a search warrant or an interrogation.
No, it came from pure chance, near the Brisbane River. This is the element of the story that just sounds like fiction.
Right, Haber.
A 12-year-old boy, just fishing near the riverbank, found a piece of wood. It was a crudely sawed-off rifle butt.
So the police are called.
Water police deployed divers to the area immediately, and using the butt as a reference point, they located the matching sawed-off barrel stuck deep in the river mud nearby.
This was undeniably the weapon used to shoot Asquith. But the condition of the gun, that was key to explaining why he survived, right?
That's the stunning irony of the case. Ballistics expert Wayne Bennett analyzed the recovered firearm, and he confirmed that the barrel had been crudely and, unprofessionally sawed off.
And that amateur modification was the direct cause of his survival. How so?
Well, when you modify a barrel that crudely, the exit path of the bullet is compromised. The rough, uneven cut caused the soft lead projectile to fragment violently as it left the barrel.
And it reduced its velocity.
Severely. It reduced its velocity and its impact. If the gun had been unmodified or if the cut had been professionally smoothed, that bullet would have maintained its shape and velocity and, well, it would have caused an instant and fatal brain injury.
Her own haste and amateur modifications inadvertently saved his life.
Her attempt to create a concealable weapon was the very thing that botched the murder. But the police still needed to irrefutably link that gun from the river to Patricia Byers' home.
How did they connect river mud back to her suburban garage?
This is where microforensics win the day. Police got a search warrant for her home, and they focused on the garage and its tool room.
And was it a mess?
No, it was spotlessly clean. It looked like it had been hastily tidied up. But forensic expert Gary Hopewell, he targeted a small waste bin tucked under the workbench. Inside, he found these minute, barely visible wood shavings.
And those shavings were the smoking gun.
Absolutely. The wood of the recovered rifle butt was identified as a unique New Hampshire beechwood. Hopewell meticulously compared the microscopic structure of the shavings from her bin to a sample taken directly from the recovered rifle butt.
And it was a match.
It was a perfect match. It wasn't just similar wood, the grains, the structure, it all aligned. This evidence placed the physical act of sawing off the murder weapon directly inside her workshop.
The evidence trail is just overwhelming. You've got 5 forged policies, the fraudulent medical certificate, the panicked gun replacement, and now this undeniable physical link of the wood shavings.
She was arrested, charged, and in 1994 convicted of attempted murder and multiple forgery charges, sentenced to 12 years.
But the full picture of her malice only became clear to her victim 2 months after she was locked up.
That realization must have been psychologically devastating for Asquith. While he's reflecting on their relationship, from the safety of her absence, he connected a previous, highly strange illness back to her.
What incident came flooding back?
He remembered being at their fast food stall months before the shooting. And after lunch one day, he suddenly became violently ill. Intense dizziness, weakness, he was almost blacking out, stumbling around.
He just wrote it off as a sudden sickness at the time.
He did, but he had gone to his doctor afterward and a urine test had been ordered. When he checked the records after her arrest, he found the truth.
What did the test show?
The urine test revealed a near-fatal dose of the sedative Valium in his system.
She had tried to poison him first?
Yes. She hadn't accidentally poisoned him. She had administered a near-lethal dose of a powerful sedative.
Presumably hoping he would just succumb and make the insurance claim easier.
Or provide a plausible cause for an accidental death. When that failed, because he didn't die and he sought medical help, she escalated to the firearm.
So this confirmed for police that the shooting wasn't some sudden act of passion.
No, it was a planned, calculated effort to eliminate him for financial gain, with multiple methods tried.
It's incredible that the failure to kill John Asquith led directly to her conviction. But the real legacy of that intense police investigation and the media coverage that came with it.
It wasn't just her sentence.
No, it was the sheer audacity of her financial crimes that finally exposed the ghosts in her past. That media coverage brought one family forward, and it shifted this entire narrative from attempted murder to a full-blown cold case.
It was the family of her previous long-term partner, Carl Gotkins. They saw the headlines about the woman convicted of attempted murder and complex fraud, and suddenly her 3-year-old story about their missing father just made absolutely no sense.
So let's look at Carl Gotkins. He was her partner right before John Asquith.
That's right. Carl was a 51-year-old marine engineer. He's described by everyone as honest, reliable, a keen sailor. He had been in a de facto relationship with Patricia Byers for 8 years, starting around 1981.
And they owned a house together in Yatala, near the coast.
They did. But by the middle of 1990, that long relationship was definitively ending. Carl had met a new girlfriend overseas, and he decided he was going to break things off with Byers and move to Thailand to be with her.
And his boss confirmed this.
His employer, a man named Ross Roberts, confirmed the whole plan. Roberts dropped Carl off at their Yatala home on July 3, 1990. Carl had a flight booked for Thailand just 3 days later, on July 6.
And that drop-off.
That was the last time Carl Gotkins was ever seen alive.
And Byers' immediate cover story was simple but highly effective because Carl was often away at sea for work.
It was. She told everyone, friends, family, his employer, that Carl had successfully left for Thailand to be with his new girlfriend and would never be returning.
And because he was known to be adventurous and often absent, people believed her.
For years they did. His family simply assumed he had abandoned them for a new life in Asia.
But the police, now armed with the knowledge of her expertise in forgery from the Asquith case, they went straight to the paperwork trails surrounding Carl's departure.
And that paperwork proved the entire story was a fiction. Thai Airways confirmed Carl Gotkins never boarded the flight on July 6th.
The ticket was canceled.
Canceled a few days before the flight by a woman claiming to be his ex-wife. And what's more, Carl's boss received a typed resignation letter, supposedly sent from Darwin, claiming Carl was settled in Asia.
That resignation letter is such an incredible piece of evidence because it's so brazenly self-serving. It has that strained compliment to Byers in it.
It's a very strange detail. The letter contained the line, "She is smart and good look. I can't see her being left on the shelf."
Which is a completely unnecessary thing to put in a professional resignation letter.
Completely.
Yeah.
And crucially, forensic analysis proved that letter was typed on an old manual portable typewriter that investigators later found at Byers' Yatala home. She manufactured the paper trail to confirm her story the moment he went missing.
Now we need to look closer at the financial desperation here. Unlike the hasty insurance fraud against Asquith, here she had time to completely strip Carl Gotkins' assets without immediate police interference.
The stripping was comprehensive, and it was swift. Just 3 weeks after his disappearance, the house they jointly owned was transferred entirely into her name.
All done via forged documents.
Forged documents, including the signature of the witness. She had perfected her forgery skills. She also systematically used his bank accounts and his American Express card.
The sources mentioned she used his Amex to buy a pergola. That detail is so cold. She murders him, and 3 weeks later, she's using his credit to buy home improvements.
It just demonstrates the transactional nature of her crimes. The entire purpose was immediate total asset liquidation. She was not grieving, she was maximizing her profit.
This brings us to the core motive for murder. Rather than just letting him leave, why did she have to kill him?
This is the legal foundation of the entire crime. Byers, using her forgery skills, had secretly acquired a copy of Carl's will by fraudulently requesting it from his solicitor. She knew the 3 possible outcomes for their relationship, and only one guaranteed her everything.
Okay, so explain the 3 outcomes.
Outcome 1. Carl just leaves for Thailand. Since their de facto relationship was ending, she risked losing everything they owned jointly in a property settlement, a long, expensive legal battle.
Outcome 2.
Carl dies naturally. Because they were long-term partners, his estate, the house, the car, the boat, would be split between her and his 2 daughters from his previous marriage, as stipulated in the will.
And outcome 3, the one she chose.
Murder and asset fraud. By murdering him and making him disappear, and simultaneously forging the paperwork to transfer the house into her name before anyone questioned his absence, she secured everything.
She eliminated the daughter's claim, she eliminated the property settlement.
And she immediately gained control of all his liquid assets. It was a purely calculated move to secure complete financial dominance.
When detectives officially opened the murder investigation into Carl Godkins in 1996, they faced an infinitely harder task than the Ascot shooting.
Much harder. They had no body, no confirmed murder weapon, and the crime scene was 6 years cold.
This required the prosecution to build an airtight chain of purely circumstantial evidence.
The difficulty lay in proving beyond a reasonable doubt that he was dead, not just missing, and that Byers was the killer. An initial search of the property back in 1990 hadn't yielded anything, though some suspicious fresh concreting had been noted.
So in 1996, investigators focused on the most likely site for the fatal incident, the master bedroom of their Yatala home.
They needed evidence that the crime happened indoors before the body was disposed of elsewhere. And Byers herself, years later, gave a very subtle, perhaps unintentional clue to John Asquith about the bedroom furniture.
The macabre detail about the bed.
Yes. She had told Asquith that Carl took their old double bed with him when he left because it still smelled of him.
Which police knew was just completely implausible. Who flies to Thailand with an old double bed?
Right. They immediately suspected the old bed was removed and likely destroyed because it was irreparably blood-soaked.
And this theory led directly to the critical forensic breakthrough.
The crucial evidence came from the walls right behind where Carl's bed once stood. Forensic teams, led by Senior Supervisor Darren Pobar, meticulously combed the entire room.
And what did they find?
They discovered 21 incredibly small droplets of dried blood on the wall. These droplets were minute, ranging from 0.5 millimeter to 1 millimeter in diameter.
Why is the size of the droplets so important?
The size and pattern are key to blood spatter analysis. Expert analysis concluded that this was not passive dripping or slow bleeding. This pattern was consistent with high-velocity impact spatter.
Which is typically caused by, what, a gunshot?
A gunshot, a heavy hammer blow, a forceful strike with a blunt object. The small, aerosolized droplets suggested extreme violence occurred precisely where Carl was sleeping.
So this didn't prove the cause of death, but it proved the location and manner of death.
Exactly. A violent, fatal incident occurred in that bedroom.
And the DNA evidence from those tiny droplets was crucial, even if it wasn't a perfect match to Carl himself.
Right. Given the age of the sample, 6 years dried on a wall, getting a complete, single-source DNA profile of Carl Godkins was impossible. But the police were able to compare the DNA they extracted from those 21 droplets against DNA samples from Carl Godkins' 2 daughters.
And what did that comparison show?
It showed strong biological consistency. While it couldn't offer a conclusive one-to-one match to Carl, it established a strong familial link. In the context of a nobody case, that was incredibly powerful.
Coupled with the fact that Byers was the only other person in the house.
And the only one standing to gain financially from his death. The DNA strongly supported the prosecution's theory. The victim was Carl, and the scene of the crime was the master bedroom.
And beyond the blood, they had crucial contextual evidence that reinforced the timeline of the cover-up.
The timing of the new bed delivery was suspicious. It was purchased and delivered on or around July 6, 1990, the very day Carl was supposed to fly out, and the likely date of his death.
And there was something about the carpet, too.
Yes. Investigators noted that the carpet in the master bedroom was not installed correctly. It was missing the necessary underlay. This suggested it was a quick, cheap replacement job.
Maybe because the original floor and carpet were heavily soiled.
That was the theory. And Byers' diary entry for that day, July 6th, was used by the prosecution to suggest a kind of coded admission of guilt.
What did it say?
The entry was simple but damning. Carl left, dropped him in the city.
The double exclamation mark.
The prosecution argued that the exclamation marks and the abruptness of the note were indicators of extreme stress, or perhaps a code for the act of body disposal. If he had simply left for a flight, the entry would likely have been mundane, not this emphasized declaration.
And the police did search extensively for the body, right? Including excavating under that new tool shed she built.
Yes, the fresh cement under the tool shed was a strong lead, but the excavation yielded nothing, given that both Carl and Patricia were keen sailors and the property was near the coast.
They concluded the body was most likely disposed of at sea.
At sea or in the bay, perhaps weighed down and sunk, which explains why no trace was ever found.
So, despite lacking the 3 traditional pillars of a murder case, the body, the weapon, and an eyewitness, The sheer weight of circumstantial evidence was enough.
It was. The financial paper trail, the microscopic blood spatter, it was enough to convince the jury. The motive was undeniable. The fraudulent paper trail was voluminous. And the forensics confirmed a violent, fatal event in that bedroom. The jury concluded Carl Gotkinsab's was explained by murder, not abandonment.
And in 1999, Patricia Byers was convicted of Carl Gotkins' murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. The jury was only told about her previous conviction for attempting to murder John Asquith after she was sentenced.
Which demonstrates the care they took to ensure fairness in that nobody case. She was, as the sources suggest, a master manipulator who was finally exposed by her own pattern of greed.
So Byers maintained her innocence for years, sticking to the story that Carl was alive and well in Thailand. But then, years later, a legislative change halfway across the country presented her with a choice she couldn't ignore if she ever wanted freedom.
That's the unique legal twist in this story. After serving years in Queensland, in 2009, Byers requested and was granted a transfer to a prison in South Australia.
Why?
Would be nearer to her son. A seemingly simple administrative move, but it had these massive, unforeseen legal consequences when South Australia passed a new law years later.
The no body, no parole law. Explain exactly what this meant for a convicted Queensland murderer serving time in an SA facility.
The law, enacted in South Australia in 2015, is designed to compel convicted murderers to provide closure to victims' families. It basically says that any convicted murderer in an SA prison who deliberately withholds information about where a victim's body is, they cannot be considered for parole.
So because Byers was now resident in South Australia, she fell under its jurisdiction.
Exactly. After decades of silence, if she wanted out, she had to tell the truth about where Carl Gotkins was.
So after 27 years incarcerated, the pressure of this new law finally forced her hand. It led to her first ever admission of guilt in 2016. But, true to form, the confession was served up with another calculated lie.
Detective Scott Chapman traveled to South Australia to interview her. Byers, now frail and elderly, refused to let the interview be recorded, but she provided this signed, detailed statement.
And what was her new story?
Her confession was completely new. She claimed she met Carl at a wharf on the Logan River, nowhere near their home. They argued violently. She grabbed a machete from her car, but she emphasized she used the blunt side of the blade.
Of course.
Struck him on the back of the head, and he fell 4 or 5 feet into the water and never resurfaced.
What's the strategic purpose of telling that specific story?
It's an attempt to minimize the severity of the crime and completely invalidate the forensic evidence that convicted her.
Right. By moving the crime scene, she negates the blood spatter in the bedroom.
And by claiming she used the blunt side of a weapon and he fell in the water, she turns the murder into something closer to involuntary manslaughter, a fatal accident. She's minimizing the planned violence.
Police immediately dismissed this version as untrue.
Instantly. It just fundamentally contradicted the hard evidence from the cold case investigation. Her story about the wharf and the river couldn't explain the 21 droplets of high-velocity blood spatter in the master bedroom.
Nor could it explain the immediate purchase of a new bed.
Exactly. And furthermore, extensive searches of the Logan River were undertaken based on her confession, and they found absolutely no remains, which just further indicated she was still lying to secure parole.
Her lawyer, Nick Vedaz, later appealed the parole board's decision to keep her locked up. What was the defense argument at that point?
The appeal centered on challenging the original circumstantial case. Vedaz argued that the parole board was improperly relying on an inaccurate police report about the blood spatter, essentially trying to discredit the core evidence of the original murder trial.
He claimed the police clearly got it wrong about the murder location.
Yes, suggesting her river story might actually be true, or at least couldn't be definitively proven false.
But the parole board held firm.
They did. The board denied her release, citing her lack of truthfulness. Her confession was clearly designed to game the system, not provide genuine remorse or closure, and they maintained that she remained a continuing danger to the community.
Her pattern of calculation and willingness to lie, even decades later, just reinforced their decision.
Right. As of the last updates in the source material around 2021, her appeal was reserved, and she remains incarcerated.
And the dark pattern that runs through her life may even predate Carl Gotkins and John Asquith. The sources hint at another suspicious death from her past.
That's right. There are these persistent whispers about the death of her first husband, whom she married young back in the 1980s. The sources note his death was considered suspicious.
involving a bizarre car crash or something.
A car crash or an incident while they were out shooting together. At the time, police found no evidence of foul play. But when you stack that alongside the attempted poisoning of Asquith, the attempted shooting of Asquith, and the successful murder of Gotkins for financial gain,
It confirms a chilling behavioral pattern.
Byers wasn't a criminal who stumbled. She was an exceptional manipulator, focused entirely on using, acquiring, and eliminating anyone who stood between her and wealth. #outro. The Patricia Byers case is just such a powerful demonstration of how planning and greed can backfire. What stands out most to me is the sheer, immense effort she put into the cover-up and the financial fraud.
The meticulously drawn signatures, the self-performed blood test under a fake name.
Right, forging letters and wills. She exerted more energy lying and manipulating than most people exert in their entire working lives. It was just a calculated financial strategy aimed at total control.
And that strategy defined her completely. The forces describe Patricia Byers as a person who appeared entirely ordinary, a suburban insurance agent who ran a fast food stall, yet was a stone-cold killer at heart. The Black Widow case is a chilling reminder that you never truly know what calculations are being made behind the most ordinary of suburban doors.
And you have to consider the immense cost of her limited success. She managed to secure the assets, the insurance payouts from her victims, but for that short-term financial benefit, she traded her entire freedom. She spent 27-plus years incarcerated, knowing her victims' families still have no closure about where Carl Gotkins' remains are. Was the money worth a life sentence spent battling parole boards and legal systems, all because she refuses to tell the truth about the body's location? It forces you to question the true value of ill-gotten wealth.